think I'm from the generation of people where when you were deciding what console you were going to have, that was your biggest decision of all time. Okay, maybe it's not that deep, but at the same time, when you were making a decision on what console you were going to have going forward, it felt like it was going to shape how you were going to see gaming for the next few years because you weren't going to get another one. Now, truth be told, I was a PlayStation kid. I was quite obsessed with wrestling, still am actually, to be honest, as well as things like Tekken and Final Fantasy, so I went that route instead of going down any of the Nintendo consoles. What I didn't realise while I was playing SmackDown 2 Know Your Role, Pokemon was releasing one of the most important titles it was ever going to do on the Nintendo 64. Pokemon Stadium and Stadium 2 came out in 1999 and 2000 in Japan, which means we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of them this year. Now, you're probably thinking that's bad math, right? 1999 is now 26 years away. Well, technically you would be wrong. You see, in 2000, Pokemon Stadium came out in the West, while Pokemon Stadium 2 came out in 2000 in Japan, so technically they're both celebrating a 25th anniversary this year. Now, is that cheating? Yes it is, but at the same time, it was the only way I was going to get them in the same video, and also YouTube really loves when you use similar sort of titles, so I had no choice. I'm really sorry, I'm trying to get on the algorithm here because it absolutely hates me. Because I'd chosen the path to becoming the WWE Champion, I ended up missing out on Stadium and Stadium 2 until my granddad did me a massive solid and actually got a Nintendo 64. To be honest, he probably got the console because he knew I was a big Pokemon fan and I'd actually missed out on these games because my parents unfortunately had to explain to me at a very early age the concept of exclusivity. I must have only been, 4 or 5, and my parents had to explain to me that I couldn't get Pokemon Stadium and Stadium 2 because I'd chosen a PlayStation. Bearing in mind, I was very young, so trying to explain that to a 4 or 5-year-old who wants something but can't get it is a very difficult explanation, but to be honest, they did a pretty good job, I think. Plus, the blow was softened when I eventually got a PS2 and I was just playing Final Fantasy X and Duels of the Roses anyways, so it didn't really make a difference in the end. Now, Pokemon Stadium and Stadium 2 were an excellent example of the problems of localization for people in the West back in the late 90s and early 2000s. Nowadays, we're actually quite lucky and we get simultaneous releases, but back in the day, this simply wasn't the case. Hence, when we actually got Pokemon Stadium in the West, what we actually got was Pokemon Stadium 2 and 3, not 1 and 2. Pokemon Stadium was actually an exclusive game that didn't hit the West originally. The game got a lot of mixed reviews, down to things such as not being able to do much within the game, as well as the fact that it didn't have every Pokemon accessible at the time. And who could have guessed that not having every Pokemon available at one given time was going to cause a problem? You see, back in the day, this was actually a pretty common problem. That's why Final Fantasy 3, when it was released in the West, was actually Final Fantasy 6. And then when they moved on to Final Fantasy 7, we went, hold on a minute, we've just jumped up 4 numbers. But in reality, we'd actually missed out a few of them on the way. I mean, it took them 15 years to get me Ace Attorney 2 Investigations. I know we had a fan translation, but 15 odd years to get one game? Come on. And the fact that we didn't get the original Pokemon Stadium is a testament to that. In hindsight, I actually think it was a positive, not a negative, that we didn't get the original Pokemon Stadium. The fact that it had a few bugs and didn't have all the Pokemon available would have definitely annoyed people, and I think it would have set it off on a bad foot. So in the end, I think it was a good thing we never got to actually play that game. Now, the main reason I wanted to discuss Pokemon Stadium and Stadium 2 being a 25th anniversary this year is that it brought us to the 3D world of Pokemon. We got to see Pokemon moving and have actual sprites in this game, which was the first time we ever got it. With both games getting a commentator over it that made it feel like it was an actual sport or in a stadium. Granted, the commentator had very limited dialogue, but at the same time, I've grown up playing FIFA all my life. Even in 2017, we were getting the same dialogue repeated over and over. So I think we can give 1999 and 2000 a little bit of a pass over the fact there was such limited commentary. Now, the game removes the RPG elements that are generally featured in a Pokemon main series game and instead focus on rental Pokemon. And it's important to note that these rental Pokemon are set up intentionally to cause you problems. For example, Alakazam is the final evolution of Kadabra, but Kadabra has Psychic while Alakazam does not. Frustrating, sure, but I think it's set up intentionally this way in order to promote another key advancement in the technology, and that's the interconnectivity between the main console and also the handheld console. You can transfer your Pokemon from Generation 1 over to Pokemon Stadium, while you can also transfer your Generation 2 Pokemon over to Pokemon Stadium 2. And that's important because some of these battles can actually be quite difficult, especially when you're using Fire Blast on Charizard. Bearing in mind Fire Blast doesn't have 100% accuracy, and I guarantee you it's going to miss when you need it, which is why having the option to be able to use your own Pokemon was definitely helpful. Now, unfortunately, when this was introduced into the Switch, because there's no connectivity to the old games, they don't have this available, so you're back to the struggle bus of using rental Pokemon if you're going to play on the Switch. The fact of the matter is, these games have heavily influenced Pokemon going forward, because it's the first time we had 3D models, and we reused these assets for Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness, and it's definitely influenced the future games as well. Funnily enough though, while it's had a big effect on Pokemon going forward, I actually think the best part of these games are all the mini games that are available. They add such a big layer to these games that are so fun that you could spend hours playing things like Gutsy Golbat or the Pinsir game. They could certainly be frustrating, but they add such a layer to these games that's outside of just battling that it makes you feel like Stadium was before its time, because it doesn't just focus on just battling alone, it tries to add other things into the game. Probably the biggest criticism that Stadium and Stadium 2 actually gets is the fact that it's actually too aimed at a Pokemon audience, which yes is a actual complaint. The fact that the games are aimed at fans of Pokemon. The fact of the matter is, you should aim for people who are interested. You're not going to aim football at people who aren't interested, or RuPaul's Drag Race, so why should Pokemon be any different? It aims for the audience that it has and doesn't care about the other, and that's why these games are so important. Not only do they add important features to Pokemon going forward, but they provide an ability to play some mini games that are really enjoyable. Honestly, 25 years on, they really hold up pretty well. Bear in mind, this was the first time we were able to see 3D models of Pokemon. I'm sure nowadays people probably aren't the biggest fan of 3D models and the way Pokemon currently is, and I'm sure some people would probably argue it's actually better represented in Stadium and Stadium 2 than it is in Scarlet and Violet, which I'm not getting involved in that discussion. I've mentioned it multiple times on this channel. I don't need to discuss how bad Scarlet and Violet is anymore. I think the only thing that's missing from Stadium and Stadium 2 is the fact that on the Switch you're not able to use your own Pokemon, which is a bit irritating. But at the same time, there's no ability to connect to the old games, so I understand why it's not there. I would honestly say 25 years on, they are some of the best 3D games we've got for Pokemon, and that's when you consider some of the advancements in technology that we've had since then. So I've been doing this for a couple of years now, where I discuss games years on, and I honestly feel like a lot of old Pokemon games stand up really, really well. And the fact that the first 3D game that we had still stands up pretty well is a testament to how well they did then and how far behind they're falling now. Because at the end of the day, when you're playing Stadium and Stadium 2, you feel involved in the action, not just the commentating, but the fact that the models look really good for the time. I would probably argue Stadium and Stadium 2 are the best 3D games we've had in Pokemon so far that are not Sword and Shield. If you haven't got Switch Online, I'd highly recommend getting it just to play these games. And you can join the struggle bus of trying to beat some of the hardest Pokemon in the game with just rental Pokemon. Thanks for watching, guys. It's been a while since I've done a video. I took a little bit of a break again because I've been a bit too busy doing other things, so I thought I'd come back with a video on a few games that I really liked. I'm going to try in the next few months to try and get a bit more consistency pushed through. It's a bit difficult at the moment, but I'm going to try. So I do have a few videos that I have planned when I get a bit of time, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Is there anything you want me to talk about? Make sure to comment it down below. I really enjoy making these type of videos. I really like looking at the old Pokemon games and seeing how they stand up, and honestly a lot of them stand up so well, especially games like Stadium. So I'm definitely going to continue doing this series. There's a few more I can do this year that I definitely will talk about at some point. But other than that, see you next time, guys.